The partisanship and division in this country continues to grow out of control. More and more people are becoming entrenched with their side and becoming less likely to entertain conflicting ideologies or compromise with those they disagree with. Republicans have recently embarked on a seize and control campaign in red states. Oklahoma's recent near total ban on abortion and Tennessee's proposal for one-man, one-woman marriages seem to build more barriers against any hopes for political reconciliation. But are these laws going to bolster the Republican Party, or is the control for wedge issues going to ostracize more moderates and independent voters, causing a slow death of the GOP? First, Texas clamped down on abortion, making it extremely difficult. And then Florida passed an otherwise laudable parent-teacher-student transparency law, but it contained questionable anti-LGBTQ repercussions with ambiguous language. Now Oklahoma is poised to sign into law one of the most restrictive and punishable abortion bans in history, with Tennessee lurking in the shadows with their common law marriage bill to make the union between gay couples inferior to that between a man and a woman. Abortion is probably the greatest divisive issue in the United States. And I've gone in depth in a previous video, but the bottom line is this: it's extremely complicated and personal. If you're pro-life, that's great, but apply that to your livelihood and your decisions alone. Utilizing authoritarian controls to enforce your interpretation of an ambiguous question on morality of life, be it starting at conception, viability, or sentience, as government should not infringe on individual rights, regardless of our opposition. And aside from the morality question, an argument can be had for when a fetus attains those rights. Currently, the government does not recognize the autonomy of a fetus. Citizenship, social security numbers, and tax credits are not granted until after birth. Applying any of those prenatal would create innumerable consequences. When government does recognize a fetus during things like double homicide or abuse allegations, it is predicated on the mother's intent for life, and not the fetus's right per se. Again, this is an extremely difficult topic. It's personal, and there are legitimate, valid arguments for both sides. And if you can't see that, it's not moral superiority you attain, it's lack of empathy. We should struggle with our own convictions on the abortion issue, regardless of what side we lean, and it should not be approached by a right or wrong mentality, but for what it is: exceedingly complicated. So are the Texas and now the even more restrictive Oklahoma ban on abortion going to galvanize the Republican Party and consolidate the majority of conservatives? You can bet your ass it will. You're already seeing major support from the red team. Roe v. Wade has been under assault ever since its ruling in 1973. Reagan was a scathing opponent of it, but after him it kind of just lingered in the background and only became a rally issue around election time. It wasn't until Trump completely changed his stance on abortion, because let's not forget,
would not ban it.
No.
Or ban partial birth abortion.
No, I am pro-choice in every respect.
In his efforts to woo Republicans during his first presidential campaign, have we seen such a resurgence in pro-life fanaticism. And it's this reactionary response to the extreme wokeism from the left that Republicans are beyond prepared to impose more government control and authority to implement their agenda, casting aside the classical conservative principle of less government. Because, as we've learned, both red and blue teams are content with hypocrisy and have no problem implementing their brand of authoritarianism even if it normally conflicts with their known principles. This new Oklahoma ban, which came out of nowhere, so much for transparency, makes abortion a felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and $100,000 in fines and fees. The only exception is in the effort to save a woman's life. That means that in cases of rape and incest, forced pregnancies cannot be terminated, and if so, are still subjected to those extreme punishments. Pro-life independent voters and more center-right constituents tend to support those extreme measures for abortion. By implementing more stringent authority on the matter, it creates a moral conundrum in that voter pool and makes what wasn't necessarily a top priority into a wedge issue. Not to mention the unrealized consequences of those stringent abortion bans. There will be an increase in population, and mostly from impoverished and lower middle class citizens. This will create a welfare state. It's in conjunction with the Republicans' resistance to expanding social programs that these struggling women will vote for those who support more social safety nets. And like it or not, that ain't Republicans.
Nope.
So yes, for the conservative base, this is an exuberant win. But the ramifications could shed supporting swing voters who are normally imperative in electing officials. And those groups affected most by this abortion ban are the same that have the lowest voter turnout, meaning now they have more incentive than ever to vote out Republicans. And we're already seeing that with historical Republican stronghold states like Texas and Georgia beginning to turn purple. Another red state trying to roll back decades of struggle for equality is Tennessee. The recent proposal for the common law marriage bill makes two different categories for the union of couples. After the decision of Obergefell v. Hodges, every state was required to issue marriage license to same-sex couples and forbid government discrimination upon issuance of those licenses. This Tennessee bill recognizes that the union between a man and a woman is separate from that of a gay couple, and it protects state officials from reprimand if they refuse marriage licenses to same-sex couples. Though it doesn't forbid gay couples from marriage, it provides an alternate processing. But why? If the union of a couple is to be cherished, why segregate it? Shouldn't all members of this country be recognized as equals without an asterisk?
Yeah.
Well, Tennessee Republican Senator Tom Leatherwood spoke to this, saying, "The law addresses the conscientious objectors based on deeply held religious convictions that a number of pastors and individuals have with the current law and certificate." And there it is. Though the abortion bans in other states are deeply rooted in religious conviction, the premise on sanctity of life can be argued void of religious connotations, and pro-life sentiment is not necessarily predicated on religious belief. But this law in Tennessee explicitly favors religious views over that of equality, and it cannot be overstated enough. But we are a secular nation, created and maintained by secular laws. Because let's not sugarcoat this. Religion has been used in the past as means of oppression by government entities. More specifically, Christianity in the United States have used context within the Bible to validate slavery, racism, bigotry, homosexual discrimination, and the subjugation of women. This is not an attack on religion or Christianity, and most Christians do not adhere to those oppressive attitudes. It's a fact that religion, not just Christianity, has historically been used as a political weapon, and sacred texts are still being used today for severe oppression of human rights in countries all over the world, many like those in the Middle East. It's because of that the separation of church and state is paramount to equality. and to the preservation of all religious rights. Priests, bishops, and pastors are not forced to marry those outside of the religion they proselytize. If homosexuality is frowned upon within their faith, it is very doubtful that they would be approached by members of their congregation to perform any same-sex marriage ceremonies anyway. And when government officials are issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, they are representatives of the government, which is secular, and should be viewed as separate from their personal convictions. It's under this implementation for more religiously viewed laws that will ostracize even more independent voters. Statistics show Americans are becoming less religious. More people today identify as atheist, agnostic, or just not religious than any other time in our history. Trying to force any religion, especially under protection of local government, will be met with stark resistance. So, that growing non-religious group of voters won't be voting for those who want more religious influence in our government, which tends to be Republicans. The drastic moves by Republican-held state officials may seem like a resounding victory for conservatism, but Republicans have sprinted away from center-based political philosophy at an alarming rate in effort to secure their ideology in government influence. Don't think the Democrats aren't shifting more left than before either, because they are. And the solidifying of more extreme polarizing views is causing a large growing group of independents and centrists who no longer recognize either party. But it's these drastic, knee-jerk reactionary laws by red states that ostracize more of that center-based group and making Democratic opponents more appealing. Republicans may be winning key battles now, but it could end up costing them the political war. Liberty is not exclusive to any political party, and it seems that Republicans and Democrats continue to drift further from the majority of moderate Americans. We need to stop living our lives in red or blue shades and understand that equality and liberty should be a goal of never-ending expansion and not curtailed because it conflicts with one's ideology. Because it's easy for us to demand liberty for ourselves. The real metric for patriotism is demanding more liberty for others, despite our differences.